In 1993, a man vanished, leaving behind only a map of a place that doesn't exist. For 27 years, his daughter believed it was a fantasy. Stay with me, because she was wrong. It wasn't a map of a place, it was a map of a murder. Some mysteries never let go. They sink their claws deep into a community and refuse to release their grip. Before we dive in, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? In the autumn of 1993, the silence that fell over Stone Creek, Maine, was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the peaceful hush of snowfall, but the heavy, watchful silence of a question that had no answer. Arthur Pike, a man who saw the world in contour lines and elevations, a man whose reliability was a local landmark, walked into the dense embrace of the coastal forest and simply ceased to be. He was 42 years old. He left behind a wife, Eleanor, and a 7-year-old daughter, Clara, who would inherit his quiet intensity. The search was a frantic, desperate bloom of activity in the cold October air. State troopers organized grid searches. Volunteers in blaze orange beat back the undergrowth. They found his surveyor's tripod standing sentinel beside a stream, his expensive theodolite still nestled in its leather case. They found his satchel containing a half-eaten apple and a thermos of cold coffee. They found the clear impression of his boots in the mud. And then the trail went cold. No scream, no sign of struggle, no sound, just gone. The case file in the sheriff's office grew thick with witness statements that said nothing and theories that led nowhere. It was officially classified as a missing persons case, but the whispers in town painted a darker picture. The forest, they said, had taken him. It was a story told to keep children close to home, another tragic mystery swallowed by the pines. And as the years passed, that story settled into fact. But in the quiet Pike household, one object defied the story. On his drafting table, laid out under the precise beam of his work lamp, was a single hand-drawn map. It was a work of art rendered with Arthur's signature meticulous precision. It showed hills and streams, ridges and valleys, all marked with professional-grade contour lines and elevation markers. But the land it depicted existed on no official geological survey, no government record. It was a perfect, professional map of a place that was not real, an intricate fiction. For 27 years, that map would be the only thing Clara had left of him. A beautiful, maddening, and silent testament to the day her world fractured. It hung in his study, a room her mother refused to change, and it became the central totem of her father's memory. The question that haunted her, that shaped her, was not just where he had gone, but why he had spent his final days charting a world that no one else could see. What happened to the man who mapped a place that never was? For Clara Pike, grief was not an event, but an atmosphere. It was the scent of graphite and old paper that clung to the air in her father's locked study, a room her mother kept as a perfect, heartbreaking time capsule. The cold years settled over their small family like a coastal fog, thick and persistent, blurring the edges of the world outside their quiet pain. While other children learned to ride bicycles, Clara learned the language of topography. She would spend hours on the floor of the study, her small fingers tracing the elegant, cryptic lines of her father's strange map. She believed, with the fierce certainty of a child, that it was a puzzle left just for her. If she could only understand its language, if she could just decipher its secret grammar, she could understand where he had gone. The official investigation wound down with a quiet sigh of defeat. The case file, once a document of frantic hope, gathered dust in a county storage locker, officially open but practically forgotten. The townspeople of Stone Creek, once so full of casseroles and concerned whispers, learned to look away. Their conversations would halt when Clara and her mother entered a room. The Pikes became ghosts in their own town, living reminders of a mystery the community preferred to bury. Clara grew up in the long shadow of that absence, a quiet, observant girl who found more comfort in the stacks of the local library than in the company of others. She became the keeper of his silence. The map was her only tangible connection, a totem of memory she carried from childhood into the sharp focus of adulthood. For 27 years, she held on to it. She spent countless hours in archives and online, comparing its elegant fiction to real geological surveys of the surrounding counties, finding no correlation, no overlap, no anchor to reality. It remained a perfect, professional map of nothing. The persistence that was her father's greatest gift to her hardened from a child's desperate hope into a methodical adult obsession. She refused to let his story end as a question mark, a cautionary tale told to keep children from wandering too deep into the woods. The silence had a weight, a texture, a presence of its own. It had lasted for nearly 30 decades, but for Clara Pike, the investigation had never ended. It had only been waiting for the right key. At 34, Clara was a librarian at the State University, a profession that suited her methodical and patient nature. She had her father's eye for detail, a quiet persistence that allowed her to find order in chaos. One cold winter afternoon, while archiving a collection of historical town documents, she stumbled upon a monograph written by a Dr. Alastair Finch, a retired professor of historical cartography and symbology. His work detailed the use of personal coded annotations in land surveys from the 19th century, a secret language used by surveyors to pass messages or record unofficial findings. On a whim born of long-shot desperation, she sent him a high-resolution scan of her father's map. She expected no reply. 2 days later, her phone rang. Dr. Finch, his voice a dry rustle of old paper and academic curiosity, was fascinated. Not by the fictional landscape, but by the annotations. "Your father was a craftsman," he explained, "but he was also a linguist. He's using standard surveyor's marks, but he's modified them, created his own dialect." Arthur Pike, he explained, had developed a personal, almost secret lexicon. "This isn't just a map, Miss Pike," Finch said, his voice sharpening with excitement. "It's a coded document." For months, they worked together over crackling video calls, Finch in his dusty, book-lined university office, and Clara in her father's study, surrounded by the ghosts of his work. It was painstaking, meticulous work, a slow process of cross-referencing Arthur's old field notes and survey journals, searching for patterns, for a key to unlock the grammar of his silence. They were not deciphering a map, but a language. Dr. Finch was the first to notice that certain symbols weren't geographical at all. One recurring mark, a small, elegant triangle drawn over a dotted circle, appeared in places that made no topographical sense. "This isn't a landmark," Finch mused one evening, pointing to the symbol on his screen. "I suspect it's a marker for a specific type of geological composition, something he was researching privately." Then came the words that changed everything. "He wasn't mapping a place," Finch said, his voice suddenly clear and certain. "I believe he was mapping an event, a secret history. Every answer for 27 years had been like a knife made of fog. You could feel the edge, but never see it. Now, for the first time, the fog was beginning to lift. The map was not a fantasy. It was a diary written in the language of stone and soil. The truth has a way of rising to the surface, even after years buried in the ground. The breakthrough didn't come from the fictional map itself, but from the archives of Arthur's life. Deep within a box of his oldest field notebooks, Clara found a faded entry from 1991, 2 years before he vanished. It was a geological survey he had conducted for the Stone Creek Town Council, a routine assessment of potential sites for a new municipal well. His notes were, as always, precise. He detailed a rare concentration of metasomatized granite with unusually high levels of feldspar, a unique geological fingerprint. And there, beside the dense block of technical notes, scrawled in the margin in his familiar graphite pencil, was a small, unmistakable symbol, a triangle over a dotted circle. It was the Rosetta Stone, the same symbol that was scattered across the fictional map. According to his official report, this specific rock composition was found in only one area in the entire county, the long-abandoned Black Creek Quarry, a place that had been dormant since a mining accident in the 1950s, a place that did not appear anywhere on the final cryptic map he'd left behind. Clara felt a jolt, a current of electricity arcing across 27 years of silence. The fictional map wasn't a separate world. It was a key, and it had just unlocked its first door. The quarry was miles from where the initial sprawling search for her father had been focused. It was a gaping wound in the earth that everyone in town actively ignored, a place associated with old grief and bad luck. It was a place no one had ever thought to look. For the first time, the map on her father's study wall was not a source of confusion, but a guide. Every line, every strange symbol was a breadcrumb. It was pointing somewhere. With a printout of the map clutched in her hand and a growing sense of cold dread coiling in her stomach, Clara Pike knew where she had to go next. She had to follow her father's ghost into the silent, waiting heart of the quarry. The Black Creek Quarry was a scar on the landscape, a vast, terraced wound of gray stone being slowly reclaimed by stubborn pines and dark, brackish water. It was a place of stark, unsettling beauty, a testament to nature's patient power to cover man-made wounds. Clara drove out with Dr. Finch, who insisted on documenting the trip, his academic rigor a strange comfort against the rising tide of her anxiety. The air was cold and unnaturally still, the only sound their boots crunching on loose gravel that echoed off the high granite walls. Using the location from her father's 1991 survey, they focused on the quarry's northern rim, a section of the pit wall that was dangerously eroded and fenced off with rusting signs that warned of unstable ground. The earth here was a treacherous mess of scree and slick green moss. For 2 hours, they moved carefully, their search methodical and tense. Her heart pounded with a mixture of hope and terror. What if they found nothing? Or worse, what if they found something? It was Finch who spotted it. "Clara, over here," he called, his voice tight. Tucked deep within a narrow fissure in the granite wall, shielded from decades of rain and snow, was a small, cylindrical object. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She knew what it was before she even touched it. It was a specialized polarizing lens for a high-end theodolite. She recognized its distinctive brass housing instantly. Her father had considered it his most prized piece of equipment, a custom-ordered lens from Germany that had cost a fortune. He was obsessively careful with it. It was not something he would have ever misplaced or abandoned. Finding it there, deliberately and carefully hidden in a crack in the stone, was irrefutable proof. He had been to the quarry. He had left a marker, a breadcrumb for someone to find. He knew he might not be coming back. In that moment, the quiet, melancholic grief that had been Clara's constant companion for 27 years was burned away by a cold, sharp-edged fear. Her father hadn't just gotten lost in the woods. He hadn't wandered off in a fugue state. He was led here for a reason. And the fictional map, the beautiful, maddening puzzle of her life, was not a fantasy. It was a guide to the last, dangerous days of his life. Monsters aren't just found in basements. Sometimes they live in kitchens. Sometimes they tuck you in. The discovery of the lens was enough to force the county sheriff's department to finally unearth Arthur Pike's cold case file. The new sheriff, a man named Grant Kincaid, was younger than the original investigators, a methodical man who saw the case not as folklore but as a failure of procedure. He was skeptical, but Clara's quiet, fierce determination intrigued him. He began where the first investigation should have, by pulling the old ownership and activity records for the Black Creek Quarry. A single name appeared again and again: Marcus Thorne. The name landed like a stone in Clara's memory. Thorne was one of Stone Creek's founding families, a wealthy and respected landowner who presented himself as a conservationist and town benefactor. His family owned half the county. He was, as Clara remembered with a sickening lurch, a close friend of her father's. They had hunted together, and Thorne had often commissioned Arthur for private land surveys on his vast wooded estate. The public face of Marcus Thorne was one of civic duty and old money charm, but the records showed a different side. In the early 1990s, Thorne had secretly partnered with a Boston-based development company, planning to turn the abandoned quarry into a high-end, exclusive housing community. The project had been codenamed Granite Bay. Digging deeper, Kincaid found the minutes from a series of closed-door town council meetings from the summer of 1993. Thorne's multi-million-dollar project had been quietly but unanimously rejected. The reason was a damning anonymous environmental impact report submitted by a consulting land surveyor, which detailed catastrophic risks of groundwater contamination. The project, which would have made Thorne and his partners millions, was scuttled just weeks before Arthur Pike disappeared. A cold knot formed in Clara's stomach. She remembered Marcus Thorne at her father's memorial service, his heavy hand on her shoulder, his face a perfect mask of sorrow. He had comforted her mother, telling her that Arthur was a good man, a friend he would miss forever. He hadn't just been a friend, he was the man who owned the silence. With Marcus Thorne's name now anchoring the investigation, Clara and Dr. Finch returned to the map with new, sharper eyes. The landscape was still fictional, but the annotations, they now realized, were terrifyingly real. They focused on a series of small, precise numbers and symbols that followed the course of a fictional river snaking through the map's center. They weren't coordinates, they're dates, Finch realized, his voice low and grave over their now daily video call. And times. With Sheriff Kincaid's help, they began a painstaking process of cross-referencing the numbers with old town records, municipal calendars, and microfiche of local newspapers from the summer and fall of 1993. The map began to give up its secrets, revealing its true and chilling purpose. It was a timeline. It was a ledger. A small stylized symbol of a truck, repeated 5 times, corresponded to the exact dates that a regional shipping company had filed permits for oversized loads traveling to the quarry, a company that public records later revealed to be a shell corporation owned by Marcus Thorne. Another symbol, a tiny skull and crossbones subtly integrated into a dense contour line, matched the date of the secret town council meeting where the Granite Bay project was officially killed. Arthur Pike hadn't been mapping a place, he had been mapping a crime. With the quiet, methodical precision that had defined his life, he had used his unique professional skills to create an encrypted, unassailable record of Thorne's illegal activities. He was building a case. The beautiful, intricate map that haunted Clara for her entire life, the object she had seen as a symbol of her father's retreat from the world, was the exact opposite. It was his final, silent testimony. It was a meticulous, detailed confession, not his, but his killer's. Every line was an accusation. Every symbol was a piece of evidence. The map was no longer about where he went. It was a terrifyingly clear statement about why he could never, ever come back. One last symbol on the map remained a mystery, an outlier that didn't seem to fit the chronology. It was a small square building with a single sharp diagonal line drawn through it, located at the far eastern edge of the fictional landscape. Using the map's precise internal scale and triangulating from the other now decoded points, Dr. Finch was able to project its likely position into the real world. The location it indicated was deep within the borders of Marcus Thorne's private property, a vast 1,000-acre tract of undeveloped forest that bordered the Black Creek Quarry. It was a place no one would ever go without a specific reason, miles from any public trail. Sheriff Kincaid, now fully invested, pulled the original survey maps of the Thorne estate from the dusty county archive. And there it was, a small, forgotten structure, marked on a 1940 survey, but completely absent from all modern maps. An old water pump house, once used to service the quarry's operations before it went defunct in the 50s. It was a ghost on the land, a building that no longer officially existed. The diagonal line Arthur had drawn through the symbol on his map suddenly made chilling sense. In cartography, it's the universal symbol for abandoned, defunct, or destroyed. But Arthur had mapped it, which meant he had been there. The pump house was the final destination on her father's secret map. As the cold Maine twilight settled over Stone Creek, casting long, skeletal shadows from the pines, Clara knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the story was not over. The past wasn't gone. It had just been quiet. And the truth, after 27 years of silence, was waiting for them in that small, forgotten building at the edge of the world. Based on the accumulated evidence, the map, the lens, the financial motives, Sheriff Kincaid secured a search warrant for Thorne's property. He, Clara, and 2 deputies drove out to the coordinates Dr. Finch had painstakingly provided. They had to cut their way through a wall of thick undergrowth to find it. A small, squat stone building nearly swallowed by ivy and the grasping branches of the surrounding pines. The heavy wooden door was swollen shut with decades of damp, but the iron lock was rusted through and broke easily under the force of a deputy's boot. The air inside was thick, heavy, with the smell of damp earth and slow decay. Dust floated in the narrow beams of their flashlights like snow caught in a photograph. The small space was empty, save for a few rotting crates and the skeletal remains of old machinery. A dead end. But Kincaid, a methodical man like Arthur Pike himself, noticed something wrong with the stone floor. One of the large flagstones in the far corner was a slightly different color, a shade lighter than the others, and it didn't sit perfectly flush. Using a crowbar from the truck, they pried it up. The stone groaned in protest, releasing a puff of stale air. Beneath it was a small, dry cavity, a space deliberately carved out of the earth. And inside, wrapped carefully in oiled canvas to protect it from the damp, was a thick, leather-bound field journal. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the faded gold initials embossed on the cover. A.P. Arthur Pike. It was his. With trembling hands, she took the journal from Kincaid and opened it. The pages were filled with her father's neat, precise script, detailing his secret investigation into Marcus Thorne. The last entry was dated October 17, 1993, the day he disappeared. Standing in the dusty, silent pump house, Clara read her father's final words aloud, her voice steady but fragile. The journal laid everything bare, a chronicle of a good man's collision with casual evil. Arthur Pike had originally been hired by Thorne for a routine boundary survey on his estate, but his meticulous nature, his need to understand the land on its own terms, led him to discover inconsistencies in the soil and water table around the quarry. He took samples on his own time, late in the evenings after his official work was done. The results, which he had processed at a state lab under a false name, confirmed his deepest fears. Thorne, furious and financially ruined by his failed development deal, had found a new, darker source of income. He had been taking cash payments from out-of-state chemical companies to let them illegally dump truckloads of toxic waste into the quarry's deep, water-filled pits. He was poisoning the very land he claimed to cherish, poisoning the water table for the entire county. The fictional map was Arthur's secret project, a coded document detailing the dumping schedules, the shell corporations, the exact locations of the sunken barrels. It was his insurance policy. It was a silent witness he was building against a powerful man. The final entry was written in a rushed, tense hand, the elegant script devolving into a frantic scrawl. Confronted M at the pump house this afternoon, showed him my findings. He didn't deny it. He laughed, said the land always keeps its secrets, said he would make sure it kept mine too. He's coming back for me. I've hidden this journal under the floor. If you are reading this, Clara, know that I did not go willingly. I did this to protect the place we call home. The map will show you the way. The last two words were barely legible, the pencil having dug deep into the paper. He's here. Arthur Pike's journal was the voice from the grave that the justice system needed. It was an unimpeachable testament, written in the clear, factual language of a man who dealt in truths. Marcus Thorne was arrested that same evening at his sprawling estate. He was calm, arrogant, and utterly silent as Sheriff Kincaid read him his rights, his face betraying nothing but mild annoyance, as if he were being inconvenienced by a minor clerical error. But with the journal and the now decoded map as a guide, Kincaid's team brought in ground-penetrating radar to the Black Creek quarry. Following the precise coordinates from Arthur's secret chronicle, they found what Marcus Thorne had hidden for 27 years. Buried deep beneath a section of the northern quarry wall that had been deliberately collapsed with explosives were dozens of corroded 55-gallon steel drums, their chemical contents slowly, inexorably leaking into the bedrock. And nearby, in a shallow grave carved from the very stone he had spent his life measuring, were the remains of Arthur Pike. Forensic analysis confirmed he had died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head. The trial was the biggest event in the history of Stone Creek. The courtroom was packed every day. Faced with his own friend's words read from the journal and the irrefutable scientific evidence of the map, Marcus Thorne's composure finally violently cracked. He was convicted of first-degree murder and hundreds of environmental crimes. Justice had been served, but it had come late, carved from stone and sorrow. The earth, as Arthur had always known, has a long memory. After 27 years of silence, it had finally given back what it was forced to take. The heavy silence that had defined Clara Pike's life was finally filled, not with the sound of her father's voice, but with the profound, unshakable weight of his truth. Marcus Thorne was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Black Creek Quarry, once a forgotten wound, was declared a federal Superfund site. The slow, arduous, expensive work of cleanup began, a process that experts say will take decades to complete, a long penance for the land itself. The story of Arthur Pike, the quiet cartographer, became a different kind of local legend in Stone Creek. He was no longer the ghost in a cautionary tale, but a symbol of quiet, methodical courage. His final map, once a symbol of a haunting, inexplicable mystery, was now recognized for what it truly was: a masterpiece of integrity, a father's final, loving act of protection for his home and his family. Clara did not get her father back. The years of not knowing, the endless questions without answers, had carved something out of her that could never be replaced. But she had reclaimed his name from the whispers of folklore. She had made sure his story had an ending. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, she still visits her father's old study. The room is no longer a shrine to grief, a place of painful, frozen memory. It is a monument to a man who believed that the truth, like true north on a compass, was always worth finding, no matter how deep it was buried or how long it took. His name was Arthur Pike, and because of the daughter who refused to let him go, he will not be forgotten. What do you think is the most powerful legacy a parent can leave behind? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the quiet courage of Arthur Pike. His story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how long it's been buried, can be brought to light by those who refuse to let a name be forgotten. If you were moved by this story, don't forget to subscribe to Deep End Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Well, see you in the next one.